In 1279, an empire stretching from the Sea of Japan to Eastern Europe stood at its zenith. The Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous land-based state in human existence, commanded control over nearly a quarter of the world's landmass. Yet, within less than a century, it vanished, leaving virtually no trace. Remarkably, its demise wasn't heralded by a single decisive battle. There was no sacked Rome, no Waterloo. The dissolution of the Mongol Empire unfolded in a manner that most history texts only briefly acknowledge. And there's an underlying reason for this, one that few ever articulate. Today, we'll endeavor to uncover what truly led to the downfall of the medieval world's greatest empire. But first, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Leave a comment so I can see how far this video has reached. And if you appreciate history told in an unconventional way, remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Now, let's go back to 1227. In August of that year, Genghis Khan passed away during a military expedition in China. He left behind an extraordinary legacy, an empire that spanned from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, twice the size of the Roman or Islamic caliphates at their peak. However, Genghis also bequeathed a critical dilemma: how to govern an empire that one man could conquer from horseback, but not rule from the saddle. The Mongols were nomads, their culture deeply rooted in constant movement. Winters were spent in the south, summers in the northern steppes. A yurt could be erected in an hour. Their entire way of life was designed for mobility. Yet, they now ruled China, home to the world's most sophisticated bureaucratic system. They governed Persia, a civilization with millennia of history and advanced urban centers. They controlled lands where people resided in permanent homes, cultivated fixed plots of land, and viewed a sedentary lifestyle as a hallmark of civilization. This presented a fundamental contradiction, destined to tear the empire apart from within. Following Mongol tradition, the empire was considered the collective property of the royal family. Genghis Khan had partitioned his lands among his 4 sons, Jochi, Chagatai, Ogadai, and Tului. But it was Ogadai whom he designated as the Great Khan, the supreme ruler. Ogadai proved a judicious choice. Unlike his brothers, he lacked excessive personal ambition and commanded universal respect. During his 13-year reign, Ogadai continued to expand the empire. Mongol forces devastated Budapest in 1241, reaching deep into the heart of Europe. But then, Ogadai suddenly died in December 1241, precisely as Mongol armies were preparing to assault Vienna. What transpired next offers the first insight into the empire's collapse. 2 years of utter pandemonium, no great Khan was elected. Mongol princes recalled their troops to contest for power. Europe was not saved by valiant knights or formidable fortifications, but by an internal crisis within its formidable adversary. Ultimately, Gyuyuk, Ogadai's son, ascended to the throne in 1246, but ruled for only 2 years before his own demise. Another succession crisis ensued. A system whose success hinges on exceptional individuals is inherently fragile, and this fragility was about to be exposed fully. In 1251, Monki Khan, Tului's son, seized power. This marked a significant transfer of authority from Ogadai's lineage to Tului's. Not all princes were pleased by this development. Monki was a formidable leader. He reunified the empire and pressed on with conquests. His brother, Kublai, was tasked with completing the conquest of China. Another brother, Hulagu, was ordered to advance westward. In 1258, Hulagu accomplished the unthinkable. He captured and razed Baghdad, the heart of the Islamic world, a city that had stood for 500 years. But this triumph came with a hidden cost, one few recognized at the time. Modern genetic research indicates that during their conquests from Central Asia to Iraq and Iran, Mongol armies inadvertently disturbed dormant pathogens within the marmot populations of the Tian Shan Mountains. The Yersinia pestis bacterium causes the plague. Within decades, it claimed over 100 million lives across Eurasia, becoming known as the Black Death. This, however, was not evident in 1259, when Genghis Khan abruptly died during a campaign against the Song dynasty in China. He was only around 50 years old and left no clear successor. This proved to be a pivotal moment for the Mongol Empire. Upon news of Genghis' death, both of his brothers, Kublai and Arik Boka, declared themselves great Khans. Kublai was in China, supported by those who desired the empire to evolve into a settled power, embracing the expertise of the conquered civilizations. Arik Boka was in the Mongol homeland, backed by those who wished to preserve the traditional nomadic way of life. This was more than a mere power struggle. It was a conflict for the very soul of the Mongol Empire. Who are we? What will we become? This civil war raged from 1260 to 1264. Kublai emerged victorious, but the triumph came at a steep price. Meanwhile, other parts of the empire fractured. The Golden Horde in the west, overseeing Russia and Eastern Europe, was ruled by Kublai Khan. They even initiated hostilities with Hulagu's Ilkhanate in 1262. Meanwhile, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia harbored its own territorial ambitions. The Ilkhanate in Persia, though loyal to Kublai, was geographically distant, thousands of miles away. By 1264, when Kublai finally solidified his victory, the empire was no longer a unified entity. It had fractured into 4 distinct states, each pursuing its own agenda, often clashing with one another. Historians frequently mark this as the end of the holistic Mongol Empire. The lingering question was simply, how long would each Khanate endure? Kublai made an audacious decision. In 1271, he proclaimed the establishment of the Yuan Dynasty, a Chinese dynasty, not merely a Mongol Khanate. He relocated the capital from Karakoram in Mongolia to Daidu, present-day Beijing. For many traditionalist Mongols, this was perceived as a betrayal. Genghis Khan once famously stated, "An empire is a saddle, not a stone palace." Yet, his grandson now resided in a Chinese palace, employing Chinese bureaucratic methods, and even conducting ceremonies in a Confucian style. Kublai proved to be a remarkably competent ruler. In 1279, he successfully completed the conquest of the southern Song dynasty. He implemented an extensive postal system, introduced paper currency to stimulate commerce, championed religious freedom, and welcomed scholars from across the globe, including Marco Polo of Venice. However, he also committed significant blunders. Consider the Japanese expedition of 1274. Kublai amassed a colossal fleet for an invasion of Japan. The Mongols were formidable cavalry on land, but lacked maritime prowess. A massive storm decimated the fleet. The Japanese famously dubbed this Kamikaze, or divine wind. Undeterred, Kublai launched a second Japanese expedition in 1281. He assembled an even larger fleet, 4,400 ships and 140,000 men. This time, an even more catastrophic tempest sank the majority of the fleet. Marco Polo recorded that the north wind raged with such intensity that the troops declared, "If they do not leave, all the ships will be broken." So numerous were the vessels that many collided and were shattered. The estimated cost of these 2 campaigns was equivalent to the wealth of many countries. And that was just Japan. Kublai also conducted unsuccessful campaigns in Vietnam on 3 occasions, Burma, and Java. Each venture consumed immense resources without yielding any significant gains. The core issue wasn't Kublai's leadership deficiencies. Rather, it was the inherent flaw of an empire founded on conquest. It cannot sustain itself once conquests cease. The Mongols amassed wealth through plunder. When there were no more territories to conquer, or when further conquests became prohibitively expensive, the empire's primary revenue stream dried up. The existing tax systems of conquered peoples proved inadequate, particularly in the face of rampant corruption. Let's pause to grasp a more profound contradiction. The Mongols subjugated the world's most advanced civilizations, China and Persia. To govern these vast territories, they were compelled to adopt some of their institutions. Yet in doing so, they risked losing their unique identity. Kublai attempted a delicate balancing act. He established two capitals, Xanadu, near the steppes, for hunting and maintaining a nomadic lifestyle, and Dadu, Beijing, for administering China. He stratified the population into four classes: Mongols at the apex, followed by Central Asians, Northern Chinese, and finally, Southern Chinese, deemed the least trustworthy. He forbade Mongols from intermarrying with Chinese. Mongol women did not adopt the Chinese custom of foot binding. However, despite these efforts, the Mongols remained a minority ruling over a vast majority. While they were formidable warriors, their numbers were minuscule compared to the 100 million Chinese. In the eyes of the Chinese, the Mongols were always barbarians, awaiting an opportunity to overthrow them. A similar dynamic unfolded in Persia. The Ilkhanate was initially even more brutal, destroying Baghdad and assassinating the caliph. Yet, gradually, their descendants began converting to Islam. In 1295, Mahmud Ghazan Khan officially declared Islam the state religion of the Ilkhanate. This symbolized the cultural reconquest of the conquerors by the conquered. Each Khanate progressively assimilated into the local culture. The Ilkhanate embraced Islam. The Golden Horde became Islamic. The Chagatai Khanate also converted to Islam. Only the Yuan Dynasty in China retained Buddhism and Tengrism. As the Khanates adopted diverse religions, the unity of the Mongols fragmented. They no longer perceived each other as kin, but rather as potential adversaries. And now we arrive at a critical, often overlooked underlying factor. Most textbooks portray the Black Death as a natural calamity emerging in the 1340s and reaching Europe by 1347. However, contemporary scientific research, particularly genetic studies, has revised this narrative. The plague did not originate in the 1340s. It emerged much earlier, possibly as far back as the 1200s, and the Mongols inadvertently played a role in its dissemination. Here's how it unfolded. The bacterium Yersinia pestis naturally inhabits marmots in the Tian Shan Mountains on the Central Asian border. There, it maintained a delicate balance, sporadically infecting people without widespread transmission. The bacterium Yersinia pestis naturally resides in the marmots of the Tian Shan Mountains, situated on Central Asia's border. Its existence in that region was one of equilibrium, infrequently affecting humans but not spreading broadly. When Mongol forces invaded the Kara-Kitai region around 1218, subsequently attacked the Tanguts, and then besieged Kaifeng in 1232, they had an unintended consequence. They disrupted the ecological balance. The movement of hundreds of thousands of warriors and millions of horses, coupled with the large-scale relocation of people and goods, created conditions conducive to the transfer of plague vectors from marmots to other species and, eventually, to humans. Scientists refer to this phenomenon as the Big Bang of the plague, a sudden dispersal of the bacterium into 4 new genetic lineages, all connected to the Black Death. From Central Asia, the plague extended eastward along Mongol trade routes. The siege of Athna between 1232 and 1233 may have claimed the lives of 1 million people, representing 40% of the city's population. Some historians speculate this wasn't merely famine, but an early outbreak of the plague. Westward, Hulagu's campaign against Baghdad in 1258 likely brought the plague to Iraq and Iran. Curiously, however, the plague didn't immediately explode into a rampant epidemic. Instead, it spread incrementally, establishing new focal points in various areas. Then, in the 1330s, a triggering event, perhaps climate shifts or earthquakes, occurred, causing the plague to accelerate rapidly. By 1346, the plague emerged in Kaffa on the Black Sea, a Genoese-controlled trading port within the Golden Horde's territory. A well-known, though potentially inaccurate, story recounts Mongol armies besieging the city but suffering a plague outbreak in their camp, prompting them to catapult diseased bodies into the city. Regardless of the story's veracity, one fact remains clear. Genoese ships fleeing Kaffa introduced the plague to Sicily in October 1347, from where it propagated across Europe. The outcome was devastating, with at least 100 million deaths across Eurasia, possibly reaching 200 million. For the Mongol Empire, the repercussions were catastrophic. Numerous Mongol rulers and elites perished, the military was weakened, local economies collapsed, and Silk Road trade was disrupted. The Hulagu state, the first Ulus to disintegrate in 1335, may have fallen partly due to the plague. Historian Christopher Beckwith observed, it killed many Mongol rulers and other elites, weakened the army and local economies. This stands as a classic instance of unforeseen consequences. The Mongols constructed the most extensive intercontinental trade and transportation network of their era, the Pax Mongolica. Yet this very system ironically became a conduit for death. After Kublai's demise in 1294, the Yuan Dynasty quickly began its decline. The problem of succession resurfaced. Between 1308 and 1333, 8 emperors reigned in just 25 years. 2 were assassinated, and all died young. The absence of a recognized succession rule meant each emperor's death ignited fierce conflicts among contenders. At a time when the empire desperately needed strong, centralized authority to maintain power, the Mongols squandered resources on internal strife. Meanwhile, Chinese discontent festered. Exorbitant taxes to fund failed campaigns, rampant corruption in the bureaucracy, natural calamities, floods from the Yellow River's overflow, famine due to ineffective agricultural policies, and widespread disease fueled the unrest. In the 1350s, rebellions erupted across China. The largest rebel faction was the Red Turbans, a movement blending Buddhist ideology with anti-Mongol nationalism. Among their leaders was Zhu Yuanzhang, a poor peasant and former Buddhist monk. In 1368, Zhu Yuanzhang and his army entered Dadu, Beijing. The last Yuan emperor, Togon Timur, fled to Mongolia, forsaking the imperial treasury. The Yuan dynasty collapsed. Zhu Yuanzhang established the Ming dynasty and became Emperor Hongwu. The Mongols retreated to their ancestral steppes. They attempted to sustain a northern Yuan government, but never reclaimed China. In the west, the Ilkhanate fractured into numerous smaller states by 1335. The Chagatai Ulus fragmented further and weakened. The Golden Horde endured the longest, but also gradually disintegrated due to internal conflicts and pressure from Rus. In 1480, when Ivan III refused to pay tribute to the Golden Horde, it signified the end of the Mongol yoke over Rus. The Mongol Empire, history's largest contiguous empire, ceased to exist. Let us reflect on why such a mighty empire collapsed. There are 7 primary interconnected reasons. First, a fundamental structural contradiction. A nomadic society could not govern sedentary civilizations without transforming itself, but by transforming, it forfeited its inherent advantages. This was an intractable paradox. Second, its excessive size. The expansive empire proved too vast for a single ruler, and its fragmentation spawned rival seats of power. Without modern communication and transport systems, unity couldn't be sustained. Third, a numerical imbalance, a minority governing a majority. Mongols made up less than 2% of the empire's populace. As their military might waned, they lacked the manpower to maintain control. Fourth, an economy predicated on plunder. An empire built on conquest inevitably crumbles when expansion ceases. The Mongols failed to transition promptly to a sustainable economic model. Fifth, persistent succession disputes. Lacking a clear system for transferring power, each new generation faced internal strife. This drained resources and led to disunity. Sixth, reversed cultural assimilation. Essentially, the conquered peoples culturally absorbed their conquerors. As the Khans embraced diverse religions and customs, the coherence of the Mongol Empire eroded. Seventh, the plague. A seldom mentioned factor, it claimed millions of lives, devastated economies, disrupted trade routes, and weakened both rulers and subdued populations. No single cause led to the downfall of the Mongol Empire. It was a confluence of all these circumstances, a perfect storm of internal contradictions, strategic missteps, and uncontrollable factors. So, what can we glean from the Mongol Empire's collapse? Lesson 1. Triumph doesn't guarantee longevity. The Mongols were the foremost warriors of their era, yet the skills that facilitate conquest don't always translate to effective governance.
Many contemporary organizations, businesses, and even nations make this identical error. They excel at initiation but struggle with sustainment. Lesson 2. Structural inconsistencies cannot be overcome solely by sheer determination. Kublai was a genius, but he couldn't resolve the fundamental conflict between nomadic and sedentary lifestyles.
Some dilemmas lack straightforward solutions. Sometimes a choice must be made between two incompatible paths. Lesson 3. Systems reliant on specific individuals are fragile. The Mongol Empire flourished under exceptional leaders like Genghis Khan, Ogedei, Monk, and Kublai. However, when ordinary individuals assumed power, the system faltered. For stability, organizations require robust institutions, not simply gifted personalities. Lesson 4. Unintended repercussions. The Mongols forged the most extensive trade network of their time, yet this very network facilitated the spread of the disease that killed millions. In our interconnected modern world, we too must acknowledge the unforeseen outcomes of our actions, from climate change to pandemics. Lesson 5. Diversification is a double-edged sword. The Khans adopted various cultures and faiths. This aided them in more effective local administration, but simultaneously undermined the empire's unity. In commerce and politics, striking a balance between local autonomy and centralized authority remains an enduring challenge. Lesson 6. No empire endures forever. Rome fell. The Mongols fell. Britain fell. All empires eventually reach their conclusion. The question isn't if it will happen, but when and how. Humility in the face of history is an invaluable trait. Thus, how did the narrative of the Mongol Empire conclude? Not with a bang, but a whimper. There was no forceful overthrow, no official surrender, only a gradual decline. The once mighty khanates were dismantled by time and events, but their legacy persists. The trade routes they established connected east and west, laying the groundwork for the age of discovery. Cultural exchange during the Pax Mongolica disseminated technologies, concepts, and knowledge. The political boundaries they drew still exist in some regions, such as Russia and parts of China. The national identity of subjugated peoples in Russia, China, and Persia was partly shaped through resistance to the Mongols, and perhaps most significantly, their history reminds us that no authority is absolute, no triumph is eternal, and our choices, however minor they may appear, can shape the future in ways we cannot possibly foresee. The Mongol Empire didn't collapse due to a single identifiable cause that one could point to and declare, "This is why it fell." Instead, it succumbed to a complex interplay of internal contradictions, misguided decisions, succession crises, cultural assimilation, economic breakdown, and a catastrophic pandemic whose spread they themselves inadvertently facilitated. This is a truth rarely articulated, because it is intricate, lacks a facile answer, and compels us to view history differently, not as a tale of heroes and villains, but as a narrative of individuals making choices under specific circumstances, the consequences of which no one could always foresee. If this explanation offered you a fresh perspective on history, please share in the comments what other lessons you perceive in the downfall of the Mongol Empire. Should you be interested in exploring further historical narratives, remember to subscribe and activate the notification bell. Please give this video a thumbs up so that the YouTube algorithm recognizes the value of disseminating quality content. Share it with your history enthusiast friends. For our next installment, we will delve into a different historical account, perhaps the collapse of Rome or Napoleon's tactical missteps. Which subject would you prefer to hear about? Leave your suggestions in the comments below. Thank you for your viewership. M.